Good morning, Robin. Thank you very much for being willing to speak to us today about your experience of NDAs and racism. And I'd like if you could begin by just telling a little bit of the story of how you encountered discrimination and racism in your workplace, and a couple of specific examples, perhaps, to give the context to people listening.
Sure. Well, I had been in the federal government, a federal government employee since 1999, actually quite a while. And and my experience there was one where I was seeing privileges being given to like my white colleagues and over myself and other black colleagues, but I didn't even think about challenging it, and that was partly because during that time I still do I was living with depression, so my kind of depressed mind was rationalizing this and thinking, oh, they deserve it, I don't, that's the way the mind works, right? In 2017, in December of 2017, myself and a good friend of mine launched an organization within the federal government called the Federal Black Employees Caucus. And we were challenging directly systemic anti-black racism in the federal public service. And oh boy, then my bosses, who were mostly white women who had been just very nice over all these years, got really unnice. Shortly after we launched FBAC, as it's called, the Federal Black Employees Caucus, my bosses started hitting me with one sanction after another. In fact, let me take a step back. We launched FBAC in December of 2017. In January of 2018, I did something that I had never thought of doing or had the courage of doing, and that was I went to one of my, again, white female bosses and asked her why she had given a specific privilege, in this case, an acting position, to a colleague, a junior colleague who had been with the team for 3 months without even offering it to me, who had been with the team for 10 years. And she looked me in my face and said, "Oh, Robin, that's because your work doesn't meet expectations." And then 1 week later, she imposed a formal work action plan on me, which is like it's like a thing that you usually do with an employee who's having issues after you've raised it informally, you've tried to help them the whole bit. Basically, this is kind of the formal work action plan is kind of a thing you need in a unionized environment to get ready to fire somebody, right? 1 week later, and then so that was one of the sanctions, and they got increasingly severe, culminating with um, shortly after I revealed to that same boss that I lived with depression, literally the next day, she said, ordered me to go leave work and have a medical evaluation because they were concerned for my safety and the safety of my colleagues. And then while I was away, they actually banned me from all my departmental buildings without telling me. And I know this because I got this poster, they circulated to security guards. I got this through access to information. And the poster said, Robin has been banned from all departmental buildings. If he shows up, ask him politely for his pass. If he refuses, call security, and don't hesitate to call 911 if he shows signs of violence.
And Robin, when you formally made your complaint, you were presented with an agreement that included a confidentiality, non-disclosure agreement clause, and also a clause saying that you wouldn't give any publicity to this matter. So, what was your reaction to that when you saw that?
Well, let me give you some background on that, right? So after they banned me from the buildings, I mean, as I mentioned, I got the poster that they had circulated to security guards through access to information. It was using that I then even got them to have a meeting in the first place. I also had filed a complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and it was only when that complaint got referred, when the commission referred that complaint to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, that my bosses were even suddenly willing to meet. And that's, I would suspect, because when things go to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, if there's a hearing, every single word of what happens gets posted on the internet, right? It's public. Right? So it was then that they were willing to negotiate, and then that's where the part of the deal was an NDA. right? I had this deal saying that I was going to get some money. I was going to be able to go off and basically do whatever I wanted, get my full salary. Like full salary in addition to $25,000 cash on top of that. All I had to do was, oh, sorry, I had to drop my complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which I did. I had to drop my union grievances, which I did. And I had to sign the NDA saying that I wouldn't talk about all the bad stuff they'd done to me, which I did, right? But then, as you know, that's why I'm here. I just thought, this whole NDA thing, nah, I'm not doing that. So I started, I forget, maybe a year after I broke it and started t talking publicly about what happened and basically daring them to fire me, and which they have not done.
So, Robin, what was the reason, do you think, that they managed to persuade you just to begin with that you should sign this?
Oh, that was easy to so in order to get the goodies, right? So to get the money and to get the release to do what I wanted. I mean, that's a big carrot. Yeah, that's very attractive, right? I needed to sign the NDA to get that to get the good stuff, right? And it's very good stuff, right? I was released with my full salary to go into the community and become a full-time black activist. That's pretty good. They wanted me to go off and just be quiet, and honestly they had no idea. And this is kind of shows how little they understand about what's going on. They had no idea what it meant to release me to go out there and be a full-time black activist.
So, what I'd like you to do is to take us to when you started to question whether or not you'd actually keep this NDA, because this was obviously a process that you went
Yeah.
through, both in terms of practicalities, because you signed the deal, you got what you wanted. And then at what point and what was it that you were thinking when you decided, nah, I'm going to talk about it anyway, no matter what I signed?
Um, Great question. So I signed and then went on interchange with the Federation of Black Canadians, and so to be out there working on that, it just made me, it just became clearer and clearer to me that that it was really important for me in particular to tell my story. Oh, that was actually, this is part of the thought process. I also was beginning to realize that there are other black people going through similar things who had probably signed NDAs but weren't breaking them, right? And I suddenly realized, boy, I'm in a really unique situation here where I'm starting to realize I think I am going to break this NDA and talk about this because it's really important. And also, this is key, I think I just realized they're they're not going to come after me because of, if they do, then the whole thing would go public. And apparently I was right because I've been talking about this for 4 years and they haven't done anything.
What do you think you could say, Robin, to those other Black people in the same situation who are either being faced with an NDA when they raise allegations of racism and privilege, or that maybe have already signed an NDA? Your
Oh,
message be to them?
I'm glad you. Yeah, yeah, no, no. I'm really glad you asked that question. And my answer is certainly not that everyone do what I did, right? Like there's certain, right, like I had the temperament to do it. I have a partner who has a good job, right? So if I got fired, right? So I would definitely, people have to uh take their own situation into account. It is a very what I did is a very risky thing, right? For obvious reasons, right? Not everyone should go this route, right? So however, okay. That's one thing I'd say. The other thing that I'd say to people is also keep on the flip side is keep in mind, like I say, if the people for them to come after you, then everything they did against you is going to go public, or you're going to make it public. So you know what? That's one thing to keep in mind, right? Without all the other things I just mentioned, right? Like I say, don't rush into it without, thinking through the risks. But in terms of the likelihood of the people coming after you, keep that in mind, right? The whole point of the NDA is they want this stuff to be hidden.
You know, Robin, that we have been trying to press forward with federal legislation that would protect federal employees from having NDAs forced on them for harassment and discrimination and sexual misconduct. And of course, with the government now having a prorogued parliament, that's ended for a while. But we have been doing this because we see the federal civil servants in a way as very symbolic of the values of government. So what would you say to what will be the next Canadian government, whichever that will be, about the importance of passing legislation to protect civil servants from NDAs?
Oh no, definitely to go ahead and do it because the NDAs are being used as a way to perpetuate systemic discrimination, right? And all these governments would certainly, in their values say that they're against that, right? They're against, systemic anti-black racism. They're against systemic sexism. But if you if you really want to put those values into action, you gotta stamp out the use of these NDAs that are being used to hide all what's going on, right? Not to mention the just even if I was speaking to a conservative government, which looks like we may be, right, from a fiscal responsibility point of view, right? Again, they gave me $25,000. They're using public money to pay people off to be quiet. That's right. Even a conservative government wouldn't. That's not the value that they right can get behind, right? So yeah, I'd say for regardless of the political stripe, everyone should be implementing legislation to eliminate the use of NDAs for these purposes.
And finally, Robin, what are you going to do going forward? I mean, you've certainly been very active in the last 4 years or so on this issue. What are you going to do going forward to try to spread this message, and also obviously to work on systemic racism issues in the civil service?
Oh, I mean the work that I do right now with the group that I lead, the 613-819 Black Hub, is community based. That's my focus, right? But I still support like the Federal Black Employees Caucus is still up and running and strong. So I support that, and I'll continue to speak out and tell my own story because as I mentioned, it's there's still very few of us who have gotten ourselves to a point where we can safely do that, right? A lot of people cannot safely do that. So I don't expect them to be taking the kind of risk that I did. But if I can through speaking out, if I can encourage people to do so, right, to find the courage to do so, then that's the goal.
Thank you, Robin. That's a very inspiring message.